Today's webinar is going to be on the introduction to CTC MEP3, a little bit more looking into the mechanical side of things. So let's get started. So my name is Patrick Simek. I'm a technical consultant at SolidCAD on the AEC team. And today I'm going to be speaking to CTC MEP3, which is the CTC Mechanical, Electrical, Plumbing Productivity Pack. My email is here, patrick.simek@solidcad.ca, and we'll be going through today's webinar. So today's learning objectives. So first is identify what is the CTC MEP3. So we're going to look at that and what exactly it is. Then with the CTC MEP3, as I mentioned, we're going to strictly look more towards the mechanical or HVAC side of things. So we're going to see how we could quickly create a project, add spaces, and even run an HVAC calculation within the model. Once we have that all kind of complete and running, we're then actually going to see utilizing the CTC MEP3, how can we use the Revit schedules to help us design and model our projects. And finally, at the end, just seeing how with all of these calculations run, all of our modeling elements placed into our projects, how do we finalize it with a construction document set? And utilizing the CTC MEP3 productivity pack to help us get to that point. So what is the CTC MEP3? So the CTC MEP3, or the Mechanical, Electrical, Plumbing Productivity Pack, is an industry-leading content pack. It was specifically designed for companies who are designing or working in both the mechanical and electrical disciplines. It is an abundance of comprehensive Revit family content, established workflows, and streamlined processes, and much more. The new CTC MEP3 20.1.1 comes in both metric and imperial. So just a brief overview on a little bit more details to the MEP3. So some of the overview items here. Project setup time utilizing the CTC MEP3 is decreased by utilizing comprehensive project organization, which we'll kind of dive into the live demo. With the content that has been provided, we could automatically detect when elements are mistakenly placed on the wrong work set. So visibility graphics and settings and view templates have already been set up for us with a specific workflow to follow as we model in our projects. There are 50 view templates for all view types, including schedules, and 100 predefined view filters. All family content is fully integrated with extensive schedules and tags. There's over 350 mechanical families based on manufactured content, over 225 mechanical details with all Revit linework and annotations, more than 350 electrical families with over 200 symbols. All family content is fully integrated with extensive schedules and tags. Along with the pack, user manuals includes links to instructional videos. That's just a little bit of a brief overview of what the CTC Productivity Pack is, and we're actually going to jump in right into a live demo. Just switch into Revit. So from here, I've already started my project. So the CTC Productivity Pack comes with content. So many different types of families, tags, all the things that you need to have to start a project or to work in a project have already been done for you. So that's the CTC MEP3. From here, as I opened up the project, we could already see a starting page. Just looking at the starting page that comes with the pack, a little bit of information. So that there is a lot of great information and great workflows, and a little bit of a complexity also when you are working within the pack, but you do get a very good deliverable. So from the starting page here, there's many different schedules that we could see, and also just kind of a generic starting area where we could add some information about the projects that we are working with. We have some mechanical and electrical properties that as we start populating our modeled elements, we could start looking at that information. You could start changing information, which will then recalculate all of the different properties and settings integrated within the families. At the very top here is actually a pretty interesting schedule. As you are working with the MEP Productivity Pack, there are many schedules to work with. There are also conditional formatting, which allows you to understand how to use a schedule. So as we see here, the MEP PP conditional formatting, as we are going to look into a few of the schedules, we can start to see some coloring. So green, required input information on the user's side. Yellow, an optional input. Blue, design specific and override input values. Red, obviously it's going to be an error or a problem. We got orange, a warning or a potential problem. Gray, those are true calculated values that cannot be modified inside of the projects. And then we see a few other ones at the end. So with this starting page, it already kind of helps us identify some of the project properties and settings that are going to be incorporated within the workflows and the families we work with, but then also looking at how we could use schedules with some kind of conditional formatting to guide us and design for our projects. So from here, with that starting page, if I look at the project browser on the right, there is a specific organization and workflow as you go step by step in a project. If I expand the views option here, there is a development cycle setup, and we can see now different ways that views are set up here. Every single view within the productivity pack comes with a view template. So as you assign a view template, it already knows exactly where to organize it to. On the project browser, looking from here, if I go to the model setup portion and I expand it. So this is kind of, as we all know, start up your project, we go through here. I'm going to expand to the architectural Revit location, go to my model setup plan and double click into that view. Once I have this view open, there's already some predefined. So I already have kind of set a link inside of the project with some of the information and kind of just associated to it instead of going step by step through everything. But as we have here, we have some scope boxes. As you modify these scope boxes based on the size of your project, not all projects are the same size, these scope boxes actually do a lot more than what we just see is just adjusting the scope box. All these scope boxes that we have in place here, from HVAC scope box, maybe to the overall building, they're already assigned to views. If I look in the project browser and I expand construction document permit views, we have again a list of different disciplines. As I start expanding HVAC, floor plans, we have all these different views in place. If I were to just select my HVAC floor plan 01, and with it selected, if I look to the properties and I scroll down, I can already see there has been assigned a building scope box. All of these views inside of the construction and permit location, let it be the floor plans or the ceiling plans they're using depending on the discipline, have already scope boxes applied to them. So as you modify a scope box in one location, all of these views are being then populated with that information or change. So another great starting point here to help us quickly bring ourselves into the starting of a project. Another nice feature here is just from the floor plan, if I look at one of my sections and I go to that view, how are those views already created? They're created because there's already initialized levels living within the project template. So within the project template, we could already see there's existing levels. This is where you will start modifying the levels, aligning them to the architectural model, renaming them to be the exact same level name, and deleting any levels that are not needed. So the project template does come with all these levels, along with some reference planes. So if you are referencing your elements to the architecture model, which you can, or if you want to control how elements are being moved up and down or kind of relocated based off of their references, you could then use a reference plane, which is already pre-established inside of the pack. But with that said, as we kind of get that initial setup in place, what I'm kind of trying to show here is all of the content that's created is already at your hands and ready to be used. So if I were to start a project, as I have here, linking in the architectural model, I want to kind of quickly now get some information. So I want some space information. I want some space data. I want to kind of get my HVAC calculation load and begin already designing and modeling to some type of values. So utilizing my view that I have over here, I'm going to start by adding some of the kind of the spaces that I would like to kind of use, or that information. There is another tool that I've added. It's by Ripple HVAC. This kind of actually helps us automate placing in spaces, placing in parameters and information about spaces within your projects, instead of individually doing it one by one and having it as a manual process, but also having it more of a true HVAC calculation that may not be so attainable if you were to do kind of manually on yourself. This tool has been created to kind of help you automate that in a quicker way. So from the view that I'm in already here, with my tool, Ripple HVAC installed, we have some different options. We actually want to predefine some of these settings. Starting from the left side, we got set recommended settings. So what they set recommended settings, when you do HVAC calculations, there are a lot of settings that are not only in just one spot, like inside of a settings dialog box, they're all over the place. So this button will actually just set specific load calculation settings that make it easier for proper calculations to be done for your Revit projects. So with that said, all I just got to do here is simply just click the button, give it a few seconds, and some of the recommended settings are done. You will see these settings as we move forward when we run the HVAC calculation load. Settings have been changed based off of some default options. Again, you could always change those to what outcome you would like. Now, to add spaces, typically what you would do, we would click the Analyze tab, click space, maybe place space automatically, run through it. But what if we do have plenum spaces? So what's nice about this tool here is as I add rooms to spaces, it actually starts adjusting and placing plenum spaces, which does take a long time. If you're ready to do it manually, this tool kind of helps automate it. So the function will place a space in all rooms from all linked models and copy over room name and room number to the space. It will also fill up the spaces, even plenum spaces, to get proper calculations. So with that, let's click the button and let it run. It does take a few seconds to run through. It will create separate schedules within the product based off of the add-ins, properties, or settings that have been set up, but it's still using just the generic or out-of-the-box Revit data being placed, or parameters that are being placed here. And as we could see, as the tool is running through, we're starting to see the different spaces being loaded. I'm just going to give it a second or two here to run through placing those spaces. And it's not only going to place any space on one floor, it's going to place it throughout your whole project. So instead of individually going floor by floor, place spaces automatically, this will do it as a whole. You'll always get some kind of dialog box to come through and say what you have done. So here we could see the amount of spaces have been placed, 39. Going to click OK. Here's my schedule. I can see all of the different spaces that have been placed. As I mentioned, it does create its own schedule in the project browser from the CTC productivity pack. We do have many schedules to work with. And if I were to jump into one of the predefined schedules already, I could come into my space schedule, double click into here, and we could see some information that has been designed within the productivity pack. Another way of looking at our spaces, level 1 here and level 2. So furthering now the detail here, if I go back to my Ripple HVAC tool, the next step would be placing your spaces and then defining what is the space type. Now we have another button, assign occupancy categories. So what this tool will do, it will attempt to assign an ASHRAE 62.1 occupancy category based on the room name and area. So within this tool, it's going to be creating its own space types with the proper settings associated with it to define to that specific space itself. So once again, it's going to let the tool run itself. It's going to go through every single space, look at the space name, and then associate it with a defined space type, again, that comes from the tool, which you do have the ability to still customize and modify to whichever kind of values you would like to have. Once it is complete, once you're going to get a kind of a log of what has been done, some information about it. As I click OK, here we can see now all of the different spaces in the background. So there is a little bit of abbreviation to show you the space type, LTK, and then the actual spaces that have been assigned. So once again, great tool. We can see things are being done a lot quicker utilizing these tools instead of manually doing it one by one. Inside of my project browser, as I've been talking about, let's use our schedules. How can we define and see some of the information about our spaces? This schedule that we're looking at comes from the tool that gets generated in the CTC productivity pack. We do have our own schedules that already have been defined. I'm going to go to my mechanical schedule. And if I come into here, go to my load calculations, space load summary. And now we have this specific schedule showing us that same information, just a little bit differently. within our product. So we got the space name, space number, what zone it is a part of, or what zone it's a part of here, the space type that has been assigned to it, and all the other space information that has been applied. As we keep working through the tool, back to the Ripple HVAC tool, we have now set internal loads. So this button will compare the actual internal load values with the space type default values and use the most likely value. So I'm just going to click this tool once again, let it run through some information. Chairs were just found, so it's using that information based off the internal loads and clicking OK. The last tool that I'm going to use from the Ripple HVAC is set code minimum construction types. So what this will do, the tool will automatically assign construction types from ASHRAE 90.1 using the location and connecting it to its corresponding properties. So it's using a specific code based from the tool that they've set up. So if you're going to go to your space types and then you go to schematic types for how you want the space to be calculated, this will kind of automate that procedure and set some specific values. So once again, just going to click this tool from here, give it a few seconds. So here we can see climate zone 6 code, minimum override construction types have been set. So perfect. Now we got all of these space information identified, ran through a few of these tools. As I go back to my view, if I were to add some of my tags. So within the CTC productivity pack, there is a lot of content from from model elements to annotation elements. So from here, I'm just going to add a space tag, and I'm even going to add the space tag number and airflow. Click OK, give it a few seconds, and now we can see the space tags. You can see the proper information already being assigned: space name, space number. We have an actual CFM. We haven't modeled anything in here, so there's no CFM to it, but then calculated. So if I were to run a calculation for my project based off of all those settings that I used from the previous tool, we should then see the calculated, not computed, have a actual value. So let's just take a moment here. When I go to Analyze, Heating and Cooling Loads, here you'll see there is defined information from the set recommended settings that has been set. Report type was set to detail. Just for a little bit quicker tools, we're going to go to simple. Schematic types, you can start to see now there's already overridden values based off of those types that were set by the tool itself. And I'm just going to run my calculation tool. So as Revit runs through the HVAC calculations based off of those predefined settings that were from the Ripple HVAC tool, we'll get a little bit more of a true calculation than we would if we just use the out-of-the-box values or of a manual input. I'm not going to go through the report here, but where I do want to go back is to my floor plan. As I come back to my floor plan, now we can see we have the space calculation CFMs for every single location. So with that, now that we have a lot of this information already in place, we can start modeling based and defined on the specific criteria. So in this case, if I go back to my project browser and I scroll up, we're done with the model setup to a certain point here, and I want to start designing. Inside of the CTC productivity pack, you'll start to see we again have a different selection of different views here. I'm designing, so I'm going to my design model location, hit the plus button. We're going to be with HVAC, and I'm going to start by placing in some air terminals. I'm going to go to my HVAC GRD layout 01. As you can see, these these views have already been predefined and placed inside of the CTC project template that you can use, and we could start already working and designing what is needed. So I'm going to just come into some of my office spaces here, placing in some air terminals. Systems tab at the top, select air terminal. When I go to my properties, I'm going to type in a square diffuser. So from here, CTC has created many of the families directly from manufactured content. So you'll see a lot of value in it as you do place it into your project. And again, data, you could always change it to what your specifications are needed. So as I select a air terminal, in my properties, we do have a lot of settings. There's a lot of shared parameters within this CTC productivity pack, which you could use to the outcome of your deliverable for your projects. In this case, I'm just going to be hosting my ceiling diffusers to the actual model. I'm going to come into here, place in a few of these air terminals. Oh, actually, before I do that, forgot to actually change my work set. So there's already predefined work sets inside of the project template. No need to recreate them when you start a new project. I'm just going to put in a few air terminals here between the rooms. You actually see it does have a nice snapping feature to them. So I'm just going to use the 3 office spaces. Now that I use my ceiling plan just for coordination purposes and placing my air terminals, I want to then add some mechanical equipment and also start adding my ducting. So I'm going to revert back to go to my HVAC floor plan. Come into here. We got our air terminals in place. I want to add a VAV for each of these locations. So I'm going to put a mechanical equipment systems tab at the top, mechanical equipment, properties on the left. Again, many families that already been created within the productivity pack that are used in typical projects. So if I just type in VAV, here we got the hot water type. I'm going to provide an elevation in my properties here. Maybe I could just do 11 feet. And I'm going to place in my first VAV. So placing my first VAV, if I were to select it in my properties, a lot of information. As we could see, I could change it from right-hand configuration to left-hand configuration as an instance parameter. You can start adding data. This is already being scheduled since there's already existing schedules in the template. Also going to give this VAV a tag. So simply tagging the VAV and then inputting some data to it. So it's my VAV-1. Let's add the same VAV to my other rooms. Maybe I'm just going to add one here and one here. Updating the data, just using my tag. Again, this is just out of the, well, not out of the box, customized content from the CTC productivity pack that you get right when you purchase it. So I'm not using anything special that has been created. It's what you get from the content pack. Once we have some of the VAVs in place, if I were to start connecting my systems, draw the duct, you do have, as we'll see, lots of different duct types. So you do have a lot of settings, a lot of different flexibility to work with what you want to create. I'm gonna come here, draw this duct in place. We do have a lot of system types for your projects. So this is specifically for supply air, 4 different types. You got the exhauster and return air options too. As I click my air terminal, I'm gonna select and draw duct. I know this is that, so I think I put 11 feet. Come into here, let's add the elevation to 11. Let's change my round duct. You'll see a lot of different round duct types. We even have a round duct with a damper that can be placed. So if I select the takeoff with damper, come into my duct, we automatically see already a damper. So another nice feature that we could have here. And I'm going to come back into there. It's going to kind of continue this for the next 2 rooms. So we'll kind of see how we could quickly get some of these options in place. Come here, draw that. Come here, oops. Draw that in place. Just going to use create similar. Create similar there. And we're starting to get everything properly connected. Perfect. We start modeling our elements in place. So now we had some kind of CFM before that I want to model too. So what I'm going to do inside of this view, I'm actually going to just tag my spaces once again. So I have some type of information that I could base it off of. Here are my tags for those specific rooms. Here we can see we have a calculator and actual. So right now I haven't even placed in any air term or any flow inside of these air terminals. If I were to select an air terminal and add a flow, type in 100. As I type in that information, you'll see it automatically starts populating it to the tag. So we're starting to get good information coming through. So we can kind of work our way, as we just saw, doing all the calculations, placing our modeled elements in, and then selecting the elements individually. Maybe I want to get as close as I can to that number. Let's do 165 as each. Come there, 330. Perfect. Everything starts to look great. You can start adding also tags to our elements. Maybe this is another way you want to input data. I could use a tag to do the same thing. I could input a value into one of the predefined tags that are inside of the pack and input data as I am walking or as I am going through, and it populates that value. As you can see, many different ways of inputting data. But one thing is, well, is my system fully closed, or how can I manipulate the data as needed? The first thing, well, if I want to go to this space over here and I want to actually see my project as a whole or my spaces as a whole and see where I have the actual values very close to the calculated values. This is where schedules come into play. In my project browser, as I scroll down back to my HVAC location, I have underneath my space airflow summary. As I click into there, click enter, this schedule will now help me understand where do I have flow, where do I have too much flow, too little flow for my spaces. If I scroll down a little bit here, we're going to see the 3 spaces that I was working with. Space 108, 109, 110. If I move over here, we can see now we have the different air terminals that have in place for each space. Well, values have been inputted, and then you also have a conditional format. So the space here at the bottom, I have 165 each, calculating for 330. 331 CFM was the actual calculated value. I have a 0 kind of conditional format, plus or minus. You can always modify this, what your flexibility, plus minus 5, plus minus 10, whichever value you want. But inside of these schedules, easy to identify where you have the flow to your specific design, but also inputting that flow. So from this specific area where I see 117, I could come again and type in flow directly from my schedule. So instead of always looking through your projects and looking for those tags or selecting the elements and identifying, well, do I have enough flow or do I not? Schedules are a great way to kind of use to help you identify that information. So schedules are being populated. We can start to manipulate the data as we would like. If I go back to the HVAC design bottom here, if we had additional tags, well, if I start tagging my duct and I give it some information, well, what's the actual airflow on this duct? Right now it says 0 CFM. Well, how is that true if I have airflow inside of my air terminals and it's being calculated here? Well, our system's not fully closed. So there are a few different ways to kind of identify, do we have a fully closed system or not? One way is, yes, you could use your Analyze tab at the top and do the Show Disconnects options. Or a nice thing that comes with the Productivity Pack is a specific view, an analysis view. Back into my project browser, if I scroll back up to where my views are, there's my design model views that I'm working with where I do my modeling, but I also have my design analysis views. I'm going to click the plus button beside the design analysis, expand HVAC, floor plans. Here we have some of these views. Go to now my first floor plan. As I click into there, this specific view, it's just using a duct legend, showing me what has flow or what has no flow versus what has 5 CFM or more. Here we can see kind of the reddish versus a green value. And I zoom into here, we can see where there is flow or where there is no flow at all. So with this, easy to identify, where do I have to cap our open ends? Select a duct, cap open end, and then we'll see the colors properly now modify themselves. Yes, Revit kind of calculates the ending portion here as no flow since everything is coming from the air terminal back to the mechanical equipment and working with that information there. So another great view that's within the productivity pack that you could use to help you design your systems, make sure everything's properly enclosed, because when everything is closed, you do get the proper calculations and values within your projects. Another nice kind of feature, not only just showing within how we have these air terminals that are part of the content that comes with the pack, these views that come with it, a little bit more about content, say the VAV. If I come into here, I select my VAV. In my properties of this VAV, if I were to scroll down, we have some information about the inlet duct size. Right now, 6-inch. If I were to change my air terminal values. So if I come in here, select these air terminal values. So again, we have a 6-inch neck kind of going in and then 12 by 8 coming out. So if I select my 2 air terminals over here, and I'm going to pump up their CFM quite a bit. Let's go 400. Yes, we're outside of our calculated value. But if you just notice that little quick change, once that flow is added, look what happened to that VAV. As I select the VAV now, there has been some changes. We have the inlet has now a 10-inch size and the outlet has a 14 by 12, which was previously a bit smaller. So there is a lot of calculated values being done within a lot of these families that you're working with. They do use lookup tables to go to the specific or those typical values based off a certain flow. So there is auto resizing, you could say, within these specific families as you are working through, which you do not get out of the box in Revit. That is another nice feature you'll see here coming with the VAV boxes and some of the other elements within the pack itself. As you start updating some of the calculated information, other elements will then adjust themselves based off of the calculated values that they are having, which again, you want to have a fully closed system in that regard. So as we kind of work through here, just looking at a few of these different spaces that we had, and we used first the tool to create our spaces, give some of the analytical features inside, and then get our calculated load. We then started placing in our elements, used our tags to identify some information, used a schedule to look at those different values to be modified, and then we finally placed let it be the other elements like VAV, VAV2, and VAV3. As you are working, again, just a very small section of the project. Design model, that's where you do all of your modeling. So do all your modeling there. You'll see all the different disciplines appear, electrical, other mechanical, obviously, systems there, piping, and do have these different colors to help you identify the more, or the discipline that you are working with. Many different types of views, ceiling plans, 3D views, sections, all underneath the design model. As you kind of work through that stage with the design model, use your load calculation views also. You got your design analysis views. We saw our schedules that we could work with. If I kind of go to a design HVAC schedule, you can see our hot heating airflow design here. There's our VAVs. And within the schedule, we can start inputting data as needed. So there is some kind of default calculations that are being done, but at the same time, you could always input or override some information as needed. So you do have design schedules along with construction permit schedules. These are the ones that you place onto your sheet. If I were to go to one of my VAV schedules, this is now the true VAV schedule that we saw based off of the ones that we have placed in. A lot of information that has been inputted to those elements. Schedules already created for us. If I were to go check now my grill schedule, only got one type of grill right now inside of here, so we could see just that type. But if other types of grills were added, I'll just do this as a quick kind of option here. Take a grill, maybe I could change it to a linear type. Take this other one, and I'll change it to a round. So always what's kind of happening inside of your projects, if you're using Revit out of the box or even your own content, it does take time to update this data. But inside of this pack, that content's already created for you. If I go back now to my grill schedule, we could see there's already type mark added, some description, manufacturer. I could always change the description as needed. It's just data. CTC has used specific manufacturers, as Titus as an example, to base content off of, but you could then manipulate it to whatever specifications are needed. It's just data you could input, as I could come into here and start changing that information to your specific spec on the project. That goes for all different categories, mechanical equipment, air terminals, all the different elements that you have in place too. So many different schedules that we kind of work with along with modeling and designing. We talked about our model setup, design models. Then finally, you got your construction permit documentation. These are the views that are being placed on your sheets. If I go to my HVAC Plan 01 view, this is a view that's already been created with a specific view template that's used on sheets. As you can see, it's very different from my working view. only shows my HVAC elements. Just get rid of these. From here, this is where you do all of your annotating. Come here, take my, use my tags to what I want to tag in place. I could come into here, add this tag. You do have different tag types. These two air terminals are exactly the same. I could take this existing tag, change it to a different type, then I could type in a new value saying there's two types over there. So we do have a lot of information that we could start inputting already preset, call it for us, or content is already created, which is the CTC productivity pack. We can start adding some in there. VAVs, we can start adding the different tags as needed. Come into here. This one will also have the tag 2, and we start to develop that information from there. With our construction document views, once you complete them, meaning that you annotate them, get the information that you want on top of them, well, what's your final deliverable? It's to have the views on a sheet and you print. If I go down to where I have my sheets and I expand them, there's already inside of the pack, it comes as a sample project, a starting list. So if I go to my mechanical section, sheets have already been created for you. Along with with the sheets being created, are to click onto M111. Not only have the sheets been created for you, but even the construction document or the construction permit views have been placed on that view for you too. So as you can see, just in a matter of say half an hour, 40 minutes here, I was quickly able to have a linked architectural model in place, get some room information, space information as needed, start modeling some of my elements in place, start tagging them as I needed, and in the end, they're already on a sheet ready to be printed or even PDF as needed. Many different sheets have already been created. There is even a title sheet that comes. So the CTC productivity pack, it is content. It is a lot of content, a lot of great content. A lot of work has been put into place to get this pack to where it is today. Again, content modifiable to your own standards, but it is a very good starting point to get you up and running within your projects right out of the box, right when you get the pack itself. Along with the sheets, you even have other types of sheets at the end. Details do come with it, as I mentioned before in the overview. If I double click onto one of my sheets that have the details, you'll start to see many different details in place, line work, modifiable, change them to what is needed. A lot of good information and content that you are getting from here. As I keep moving down, even you have your HVAC schedules. As you start modeling already, as I've done, as I start inputting information, those schedules are already existing in the project. Those schedules, even in this case, have been placed on a sheet. So we already have a great starting point here. Don't have to kind of recreate the wheel. A lot of things are done for you. All you're really doing now is using that content right with you, and moving forward to have working in your projects. There are other disciplines too, obviously fire protection, plumbing, electrical, that is the side of it, but this webinar was specific just to show how we could quickly get up and running within a HVAC model. So with that said, conclusions here with the webinar. So HVAC calculations can be done within Revit. There is also duct and pipe sizing that can be run. I use the Ripple HVAC tool to help automate the process of adding spaces and space information to my project, ran the calculation values, and had those values for me to work with. You can leverage Revit to streamline HVAC modeling and data processes. So we saw utilizing the CTC productivity pack. We saw the calculated CFMs versus the actual CFMs, where you can easily manipulate the data to match that information. But also with the CTC productivity pack, the content that's already created for us, ready to be used, and the schedules that we were modifying and utilizing to identify some of that information. The MEP3 or the CTC productivity pack is a easy to use pack that is ready to use right out of the box. So as you saw here, didn't change anything. That's what you get right out of the box. It's ready to go once you have it running. Large amount of time is saved with the use of the MEP3 on any given project. So think about having content that needs to be created from the families, mechanical equipment, air terminals, duct types, system settings, line weights, line styles, tags. All that content does take time to create. It does take actually ample time to create. The CTC MEP3 does give you that step ahead already to get a way of creating that content. It's already there for you, ready to use and go. So that'll be the end of the webinar here. I'd like to thank everyone for coming out today. Once again, my name is Patrick CMEC, technical consultant at SolidCAD on the AEC team. My email is patrick.cmec@solidcad.ca. Feel free to reach out to me for any kind of questions or comments you may have of today's webinar or anything within the AEC industry. This video is being recorded. It will be placed on SolidCAD's YouTube webpage. So you can see that within the coming hours or days moving forward.